So I've always loved bikes and cycling. I have very fond memories of growing up in the streets of Montreal, where I grew up, and running the back lanes of the streets of Montreal, tinkering our bikes. Just, this is the typical growing up in Montreal streets. I loved reading about bikes. I dreamed of owning a GT BMX. But my parents couldn't afford it. They were expensive bikes. So I grew up with sort of your typical big box store bikes, Canadian Tire store, a super cycle 10 speed that I think so many of us have sort of like had in Canada. So as I grew up and got work and finally had money, I always had the envy of like getting the fancy bikes that I wanted as a kid. Admittedly, I'm a late adopter. And, after, I think I was like in my late teens, I had a job and I was able to buy a bike, and I bought like the fanciest like BMX bike I could buy. It wasn't a GT, but it was fancy. And then my life just went on and I sort of like lost a little bit of interest in that. I biked to go to work, but other than that, it wasn't done for pleasure. So when I hit in my 40s, I got back into it for some reason, and I got into the world of fixies. Admittedly, I was a bit old to hang out with the kids with the fixies, but I love these bikes. They were so simple. I didn't have to think about speeds. It was easy to fix. Some people made their bikes beautiful, and like if you want to spend thousands of dollars to buy these amazing frames, people did that, right? So my first experience was buying what we call almost like a starter fixie or like a beater. And I bought this very simple fixed gear bike. I learned the ropes and sort of understood how that worked. I never went brakeless because I'm 40 and I can't handle that stuff. I know that if I would have been 21, I would have tried that, but I didn't. But then we moved to Toronto and I wanted an upgrade. And I decided to buy this bike, which was a lot of bike for me. It admittedly was a very fancy bike, way too fancy for me. And I was stressed out. I mean, it rode like, it was amazing to ride, but it was way too fancy for me. I felt like I was gonna break it. I felt like I couldn't not pay attention to it. And then the bike was just a little bit too much for me. And I was still using my beater every couple of days or every couple of weeks. And biking in general just, wasn't in my ecosystem again, wasn't in my blood anymore. So 4 years later, my starter bike, my beater bike that I bought in Montreal, the one that I rode in winter in the middle of Toronto, it's still the one I use because it's a beater. It doesn't matter what happens to it. It's basic but it's still fixed gear. As by the time you see this video, I would have sold my Avanton and hopefully be on a path to sort of like getting back into biking. So I was thinking about this. I don't know why. But why did I stop? Why did I stop biking? Why did I stop riding it? There are a few reasons. First, this bike was just too fancy for me, and it is a literal thief magnet. Like, you cannot just go to the grocery store and just tie it up outside. It'll disappear in seconds. My beater bike ended up being good enough. It just did everything I needed. And also, generally, over the last few years, I've lost focus, and this is a personal thing. I've lost focus on the things that I used to love. This year, I plan on taking steps of getting back on what I love, and one of those things is cycling. Don't get me wrong, I still love fixies. I'm not bashing that world. I love that there's a community. I love that, I love the bikes. They're still beautiful bikes, but it's just not my thing anymore. As of today, I've sold my fancy fixed gear bike, but I do plan to get back into the world of biking, and I think I'm going to do it with the road biking because I think it's much more versatile and easier for me to sort of like jump on a bike and go for a long bike ride. Also, this is more of a personal thing, and it's a problem I've realized over the last few years is that I've let go of all the hobbies and I've focused too much in work, right? And this is another subject that I won't get into, but I want to find myself a little bit more and get back into things I love. My next bike is going to be something I can go on long rides with, 20, 30, 40 kilometers. I've heard of this movement called the mammals, which is the middle-aged men in Lycra, which I guess I'm going to become part of. I don't necessarily have a plan for this series, but I just felt I needed to sort of express what's going on. I don't know if this is going to become a YouTube series. I don't know what I'm going to do. All I know is that I trying to get back into something that I love, something that's been missing in my life for a long time, and I'm hoping that it becomes an important part of my life. By the time or by the next video that I upload on this series should be about my new bike. Should be maybe an intro about it and what it is and what I'm planning to do with it. So if you plan on sticking around and seeing what's happening with me in this quasi adventure, let me know.